Good afternoon, everyone. Really excited to be moderating this conversation, and we've just had, the official launch as well as the signing ceremony. And as you know, we started TLC with $1 million in grant funding, and it's now $4 million, and it's really wonderful to see the support from the ecosystem, and we welcome more investors to come on board. By the time we reach the grand finale, hopefully we can get to 5 million. So, come and look for us later. But this conversation that we're having today is a very, very important one. I think we know that the current economic climate is not the best this year. We have been experiencing very volatile geopolitics all over the world, militarization. At the same time, we've seen the climate crisis accelerate, and even the inequality riots in Indonesia that has been also linked to climate impacts. And in this very sort of, complicated outlook, how does catalytic capital continue to play a role in terms of driving the innovations that we need? And I'm going to start with you, Dr. Ng, if you don't mind. And I think to sort of add on the A-Star partnership, it is really exciting that we are now talking about decarbonization opportunities in the chemical sector, the energy sector, in particular Jurong Island. Just a quick question, how many of you have been to Jurong Island? Oh, wow. This is a very educated, informed group. So I've been to Jurong Island. I thought I was going to be the only one. I've been to the Jurong Cavern. Have anybody been to the Jurong Cavern? Wow, that's quite a fun too. That's great. This is a very engaged crowd. And it's really quite something to see, sort of like the engineering marvel that is Jurong Island and all that's going on there. But of course, we are in the energy transition now, and that presents us with a lot of different opportunities as well. So perhaps you can start us off with, your outlook, given, the sort of the global economic picture, and then also on A-Star's partnership and the commercial opportunities that we can explore here.
Hello, everyone. I'm Wai Kiong from A-Star. First, talking about Jurong Island. So my working place is on Jurong Island. Yeah, for those from Jurong Island, for those who have not been to Jurong Island is actually about 2/3 man-made. So Singapore has limited land. So we had 10 square kilometers at the start, maybe in the early 90s. And by now we have 30 square kilometers. So it's 3 times the land area. And the relevance of Jurong Island to our conversation is really, Jurong Island is one of the biggest chemical hub in the world, top 10 largest chemical exporter for a small country like Singapore, and fully integrated chemical complex. Chemical is a really hard to abate sort of industry, taking fossil fuel as a raw materials, using fossil fuel as an energy source, producing fuels and producing chemicals that we use every day. All of us will use chemicals from shampoo, conditioners, facial wash, polyester shirts, to those wearing tracksuiter, polymers, and so on. So the chemical industry is actually a very important sector for Singapore, not only for Singapore, but also for our regional countries and international, whether it's in the Europe or US. So the challenge is really for the industry, as mentioned earlier, carbon abatement. So how do we do carbon abatement to an industry that starts with fossil fuel and finish with fossil fuel-made products? So the opportunity for us is really in the energy transition. There's going to be a paradigm shift of all the energy and chemical sector, not only in Singapore, but all over the world, which means that there'll be a market for new engine of growth as we try to decarbonize the industry, decarbonize the different countries. And because of this opportunity of growth, then if you look into market studies, you can all see that climate tech is going to grow very, very steeply over the next not 1-2 years, but in climate tech, we'll be looking at 2 decades. That also means that a lot of new way of making chemicals will be invented, will be commercialized. On Jurong Island today, there are over 100 companies making chemicals, refineries, petrochemicals, polymers, and so on. And all the companies are the test bed. They're all looking for carbon solutions, which means that any innovation solution they are able to proof of value, proof of concept, will have a chance to be deployed to all these potential partners in Singapore on Jurong Island. And maybe I'll just cover one more point, then I will not take all the time. One more point is, as we know, commercializing technology is not easy. Technology is just one part of the equation. I think it really helps a lot when the community and the partnership come together to look into policy. So what is Singapore's policy? What is regional policy on decarbonization? Singapore net zero 2050, 2035, a quarter reduction in carbon. So how will policy then shape regulations? And regulation in turn then has a certain guidance on how technologies should be developed and commercialized. At the same time, I already mentioned the over 100 companies on Jurong Island are essentially your off-taker of your technology. And maybe one more point on A-Star, why we're on Jurong Island is our role is really to help companies, help innovators like yourself to then scale up your technology so that it can be readily deployed at a commercial level. Because scaling up, being able to do it at a large production scale, providing the essential infrastructure and facilities to do the scaling up is what we are focusing on, and we hope to hear from you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ng. A lot to unpack there, and I think it's very exciting that we have, a research institution come on board with all that deep tech knowledge that will help our startups as well. I want to come to you, Milena, and with Antares Ventures, from the VC lens, tell us a little bit about, your VC fund, and also what is your outlook on climate tech? I'm sure it has been quite challenging as well.
So to start with, a little bit on Antares Ventures so that you know where I'm coming from, because different funds, different strategies. So Antares, first and foremost, we're a deep tech fund, so we're looking for breakthrough solutions with a very strong climate lens. So we focus on energy transition, decarbonization, resilient cities, which could be a built environment, water treatments, as well as sustainable agriculture. What differentiates us is that we're very aligned actually with the mission of TLC, which is to bring global innovation to our part of the world and help it scale. That is why we get involved. We're very glad to support what TLC does. And we do that by offering our startups connections that are catalytic for corporate development with corporate partners in the region, and that way they can scale in the region. We invest around Series A, just for context. So how do we see the space? First, when we talk about capital available for climate tech, it's important to point out that, yes, capital for climate innovation does not match the need for it. But in the context of venture funding, it is still on a growing trajectory. So what do I mean by that? Venture funding globally has gone through a rough patch. Since 2021, we've seen consistent decline in venture funding globally as an asset class. And so aside from big AI projects, a lot of other projects have struggled to get the funding that they need. The funding, how many here are actually entrepreneurs or builders? Can you raise your hand just so that I know? Okay, less than a third. Just so you know, guys, we also fundraise. When you fundraise, we are looking up there for LPs that are fundraising, and the LPs are looking for money to fundraise. So the whole environment has been tough on the fundraising front. So a lot more needs to be done. And I think that's why convening in groups like this is so important. And I think that's why it's really good that Singapore is placing so much effort in getting that catalytic capital in place early on for the innovators to get that initial funding so that they can build something, proof of concept, that is ready for us to invest in. And once we show commercialization, I think it becomes a lot easier to get funding, because that's how deep tech works. Once you prove it at commercial scale, funding comes.
Thank you so much, Milena. And catalytic funding really is something that has been a focus point for the year. And in fact, how many of you were at Ecosperity this year? Okay, quite a few of you, and you would know that Temasek Trust had, hosted Bill Gates here, and I'm going to come to Jane in a second for Breakthrough Energy, and really trying to advocate for the role of catalytic capital in a time where private capital is very, very difficult at the moment. And I think we cannot underestimate that role that catalytic capital provides. And with TLC, that the fact that it is a grant and not an investment, and that we get other VCs who are there for the spirit of investing into these startups is really, really important. And with that lens, Jane, at Breakthrough Energy, it's a very interesting organization backed by Gates himself, and you've been looking at a lot of very, very interesting work in this area. Please share with us, some of your thoughts.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. First of all, I want to congratulate for the launch, the nice addition of TLC. In today's environment, this is super important, right? So, and really looking forward to working with you all. A little bit about Breakthrough Energy for people who don't know. Breakthrough Energy Fellows Program. This is a part of the Breakthrough Energy platform that founded by Bill Gates about 10 years ago. Fellows Program has been there for about 4 or 5 years. We're focusing on supporting early stage startups. This is a pre-seed or pre-venture, and just really at the junction of already have a scientific discovery, but the founders has a passion to really want to commercializing the technology. Yet they do not. It's too early for the VC to invest. That's called not investable, right? Sometimes. So this is the place where we come in. We provide the critical support for those early stage founders, and this including fundings, including technical and the business support. That's very hands-on. Also including access to Breakthrough Energy's global network of partners and also the investors. And at the last but not the least, and the curriculums we offer is designed specifically for the so-called hard tech founders, because this is the areas we choose to focus is hard tech solutions, focus on hard to abate industry. That's where the focus is. And so from this point of view, what I'd like to also mention, this is a global program, has been running for 4 years. So we have backed about 160 fellows from around 120 fellows from around 60 startups and across 16 countries. Last year, we set up the first regional hub here in Singapore, together with the Temasek and the Enterprise Singapore. We want to really double down and in the region because there are unique challenges and also unique opportunity in the region, and we want to work with the ecosystem in the region and double down in the early stage catalyst capital support for climate and energy innovation. We onboarded 2 Singapore-based companies. One of them actually is in the audience. Ceratec is working on the low carbon fuels for shipping. Another company, Lincor, is working on the EV battery recycling. I also want to mention in coming weeks, very soon, we're going to announce our 2025 cohort. We're going to add more startups in the climate, working on the climate and energy innovation from the region. And so quite exciting. And now regarding the funding environment question, I don't want to paint the rosy picture. The challenging environment is real. That's absolutely right. But also, on the other hand, if you look at it from longer view perspective, this is not new, right? So 2021, 2022 was the high points, was the peak point. 130 billion per year, 150 billion per year. And the global, equity investment in the climate tech space. But then coming down quite significantly during the last 3 years due to a couple of factors. This is the one thing is really the broad market correction. That's one of the factors. Another one, private sectors pulling back as part of the so-called their strategy adjustment. There are a couple of other factors. So this is real. But I also want to mention they are also signs this momentum is continuing. The investment and also innovation in the climate and energy and space. Indeed, I think it was mentioned earlier, the catalyst capital is really critical, especially for the early stage startup. That's what we're here to do. And the Breakthrough Energy, and also look like Temasek Foundation, the TLC is doing exactly the same thing.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jane.
Just
Quickly,
a very quick comment so that we are not a room full of negative thoughts. We live in a very exciting time where the convergence of technological and scientific breakthroughs are going to lead to incredible innovations that are going to allow us to live prosperous lives as humans, but a lot more aligned with nature. So it's a very exciting time to be investing in climate tech. Just wanted to lay that out there in the beginning.
Thank you for that framing. Yes, but I do agree with Jane. Back in 2021, the Biden era and the era of the IRA, don't you miss the time where politics was predictable? It was definitely, creating the enabling environment. But at the same time, I think to Milena's point, we now are at an age where we're actually at the cusp of energy superabundance, right? And we actually, published a podcast recently about how the geopolitics or the geoeconomics of the world is going to change according to how soon countries can actually tap on the abundant renewable energy that's just there for them. And then, of course, building onto that, all the other climate tech innovations there are. And on that note, coming to Spencer, I was really impressed at this Google DeepMind roundtable that you invited me to in this beautiful building as well a couple of months ago. And we talked extensively about the applications of AI in driving sustainable development outcomes. And we all know that there has been a global conversation about the energy footprint of AI, of course, and that in the sustainability, profession, there's a lot of concern about runaway emissions. But of course, from your perspective, sort of looking at all the innovations that Google is enabling, where do you think is the highest potential, and how do you think of Google as playing a role in that catalytic capital conversation where sustainability is concerned?
Thanks for that great question, and thank you for the invitation to be part of the panel. I think I would agree with a lot of the panelists, what they've said. It is a difficult context, and certainly if we look at what happened in 2024, I think it's part of a broader pullback for private markets overall. You saw high interest rates, tighter liquidity, and that definitely has impacted the climate tech space. But I think there are also some, and there's some particular weak spots. I think it was we would saw late stage funding shrink a lot. But clearly things are not going that well, but we also saw a few bright spots actually. One is actually early stage seed funding remained relatively resilient, and so that's a bright spot. So I think to the point there is capital, and then the other, which is more of a sectoral comment, is that we saw agriculture certainly in this part of the world, agri-tech still remained fairly resilient. So that's one area which, as Ben mentioned earlier, that Google is investing behind in terms of the capabilities that we can offer. But clearly, things are difficult, and so we decided to actually collaborate with KPMG as a knowledge partner. We're working on researching the topic of the state of green tech ecosystems, innovation ecosystems across APAC. And we went in with a hypothesis that it's not just about funding. It's there, but as Wai Kyung said, could policy be in the way? Could policy changes actually strengthen the innovation ecosystem? Is it mindset in terms of, or is it skills? And in those ways, can Google contribute to making these ecosystems more vibrant? And how do we bring that conversation together? So it's an ongoing piece of work. We're working with KPMG, and there's some initial thoughts that we're having. One is that while there is capital, there is what we call the valley of death, where I think there is enough capital, catalytic capital, going into proof of concept. And certainly I think A-Star and others would be behind that. And then by the time you get to proof of business sustainability, proof of a business model, I think there are other sources of capital that will then take you and really grow. But it's that valley of death of getting from proof of concept to proof of business case, a scalable revenue model. And that's where, perhaps from a catalytic finance perspective, you need that slightly more patient capital, and perhaps coupled with the ability to test bed, to actually prove things beyond just proof of concept, to actually allow companies to get past that valley of death. And the last comment I would make is also, and that's something that's interesting for Google to look at as well, is the pace of market adoption of new technologies. And I think it's fair to say that there are pockets of our part of the world which, with corporations that maybe are more conservative. And so if you don't have that willingness to lean in and try and apply novel technologies, then you don't have that market demand, that market access that startups need to scale. So that's another area which is of great interest.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for the insights there. I'm going to call for questions soon, so I'm going to get the team to put up a Slido, or you can raise your hand in a little bit. But I'm going to just, sort of pick up on this value of death question, because I think it's super interesting, and perhaps Dr. Ng or Jane, you can chime in here, because this is something that always comes up, right? And I think Jane in Breakthrough Energy has actually said that they want to help entrepreneurs and solutions sort of ride that through, and not every capital provider can be that patient. So what is that thing that you look for when you want to back something? And when we talk about failure and success rates, and then also maybe later, Dr. Ng, how do we actually influence the success rate of these entrepreneurs passing the valley of death? Because we know that for every success, there are a lot more failures.
Right. I think there are several value of deaths, right, along the journey from the lab to the market. I think I will start by saying the Breakthrough Energy was actually founded 10 years ago, when Bill Gates recognized we need to find a new vehicles to think about how we can support energy transition. So this is the patient capital everyone nowadays knows. We also developed a couple of core guiding principles. First of all, looking for the sizable impact. That's the scalability also behind the solutions. And we're supporting the company solution we're supporting. We're looking for the company, a solution can potentially deliver 500 million tons of CO2 reduction per year. Right. So that's really representing the scale we're looking for. Secondly, it is I said earlier, we're focusing on the 5 ground challenge area that's hard to abate the industry. And this is transportation, electricity, buildings, agriculture, and manufacturing. Those 5 areas are not only the largest emission sources coming from, also it's the toughest to abate, to decarbonize. So we choose to tackle the hardest problem. So this also says it does require the breaking through solutions. And so the third one is we are looking at supporting and selection, prioritize the company and solutions. We are looking for the company be able to leverage, build on the latest scientific breakthrough. But yet really sharp focus on, emphasize on the tackle economics, the metrics. During their de-risking, strictly, really sharply focusing on how to improve that metrics. The third one is the scalability I mentioned. Then the last one is laser focus on evolving market needs. Because this space, energy transition, climate, energy innovation, you're chasing the market. The market may not be there, but it also can be changing. So that's a very, very important. The founders and the companies and the solution itself has that, I would not say flexibility, the characteristic, be able to really laser focus on the evolving market needs. So that's a couple of things I can share. This is where we're looking for. We're being very successful, be able to really find and those founders and also those companies.
Thank you for those insights. Dr. Ng, would you like to chime in?
Thank you. That's all I want to add. One value of death, which I'm familiar with, is the technical value of death. Yeah. So in the industries, I think you all know that having a breakthrough idea in a lab, I think is a fantastic success. But to go to the next level from a gram scale to a hundreds of kilo scale of test bedding or pilot, that's also another challenge. And in the chemical industry, typically to build a pilot scale or a test bed, you need to design, engineer, and spend about at least 2 years before you can get it commissioned running. And then with the success of that, you'll be ready technically to go to a full commercial production, hundreds of thousands or millions of tons. So this pilot or test bed scale is often a valley of death in this industry. So what Singapore government has done is, this is well recognized, and to give support to companies to cross this valley of death technically, it has been announced this year in April that a low carbon technology test bed will be built, and this is at a cost of first phase over $60 million. And this test bed is a unique one in the sense that it's a multi-purpose test bed. So which means that this test bed is not built for one technology. It is specially built for multiple different technologies that can be brought over. And with this test bed, then we hope to be able to support many enterprises to secure the next funding by doing a successful test and beyond the proof of concept. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I have one more question, and I'll come to the questions that have been coming into. And I want to touch on blended finance a little bit, because Li Lang also mentioned, right, the TLC platform had deployed about 14 million, but then the finalists had gone on to crowd in even more private capital, and they raised $600 million in total. And I think that sort of model has become, very, I guess, popular, emerging, and in fact, I just came back from Manila last week, and the Philippines is just about to take over as ASEAN chair, and they have already articulated that their priority for their chairmanship is to scale blended finance in the region. But when you actually talk to the professionals who do it, they're saying actually the number of successful projects is small. People do pilots. What is the big, sort of obstacle in there? Because I think we're all the coalition of the willing, right? We want to put in catalytic capital. We want to have public money come in. We want private money come in, and we want it to be commercially successful so that everyone actually makes a return. But yet, when you look at the realities of Asia, that is so difficult. I mean, any thoughts here? Jane, maybe I'll get you to participate.
Yeah, there are a couple of things. I think blended financing certainly is needed throughout the entire maturation cycle for the climate and energy innovation startups. At a later stage, when the companies start building the first of kind commercial, not only the business model that's need to be proved already, prove value, but it's also what I see is a transition from the risk profile. Because if you say, okay, the money will come if you prove commerciality, the conventional traditional fund, capital will come in. That's not actually quite true for the energy and the hard tech technology, because there's a still technical risk is good, is de-risked, but then maybe on the paper, commercial risk is also minimized. You have offtake agreement signed. However, delivering huge capital projects may still remain huge risk. You haven't done it first time. So I think in the blended financing space, depending on at what stage, they really need to come in a different composition of the funding and the composition to see how the risks are shared, and also how the blended financing can work together, including catalyst capital, to be able to demonstrate the market how the new technology, the hard tech technology involving huge capital, can be successfully integrated, deployed into the market. That's the key thing needs to get done and supported by the blended financing. So that's just as one thought, one example. Yeah.
Yeah. No, thank you. Spencer, you want to add?
I'd like to jump in also on a positive note that I think it's important to state that Google is committed to our climate moonshots and our climate goals, as was mentioned earlier on. So we continue to hold to the net zero ambition by 2030, as well as what we call 24/7 carbon-free energy. And so because of that commitment, we're looking at, well, where can we help with the decarbonization? And oftentimes with the whole growth in AI that you mentioned, we're very much aware of the topic of energy for AI, but then we're also thinking about AI for energy, which is how AI can be deployed to actually really scale the deployment of carbon-free energy sources, and more importantly, grids. So in terms of the role that different players can play, I have in the audience a colleague that is head of the clean energy procurement for Google. We play an important role in some of these infrastructural discussions around grid decarbonization because we are willing to be the offtake partner. And sometimes if you have a 20-year offtake agreement from Google, that really helps make the projects bankable. Sometimes we will put in our own capital to help these projects. And increasingly, we're also looking at the technology stack behind it. So this is another way that I think stakeholders can play a helpful role.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Okay, so I'm going to give priority to whoever wants to ask the question in person. Oh, we have a Google Cube. Shirin, how does it work?
Throw it.
At the audience? Okay, so anybody who wants to ask a question, come and grab a Google Cube and we will.
Sure, you can throw it.
Yeah. Okay. And a microphone too, not just the cube.
Oh, it doesn't come with
The cube has a microphone.
Oh, the cube has a microphone. Amazing.
Yeah, I expect nothing less from Google.
Okay. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Gabrielle from Eco Business. I have a question for Dr. Ng Wai Kiong. So, I'm wondering actually how whether the petrochemicals industry has adopted CCUS solutions since A-Star launched its test bits facility in Jurong Island in 2021. How quickly has that happened? And is there a goal in terms of getting the petrochemical sector to adopt these solutions more quickly? What stands in the way of adoption, basically? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your question. So the test bed, the low carbon technology test bed, has been announced this year. So the test bed is under procurement construction phase, which will be up planned in 2027. So that's where the test bed will be commissioned and run. And some progress since 2021. So we were talking about planning for a test bed. The reason is because we see the emerging need of companies on the building test bed on the island. So this January 2025, we opened the first 100 kilo CO2 conversion to sustainable aviation fuel test bed. And this is, I think, in recognition of the need to decarbonize and in recognition of the market needs in sustainable aviation fuel. And with this test bed is, as I mentioned, to build any of the pilot, it takes about 1 to 2 years. And we recognize the need to speed things up. So with the low carbon technology test bed that will be commissioned in 2027, we foresee that the 2-year time to test such technologies will be reduced to about 6 months. Of course, depending on the actual technology itself, how complicated, but in general, 6 months. And this will also lead to reduction in investment costs to scale your technology, because this multi-purpose test bed can test many different technologies. And by having this already built by the Singapore government, then the companies can come in and focus on your core technology. And your core technology can apply to potentially different end customers on Jurong Island, even across the petrochemical sector. The energy and chemical sector is actually 3 parts. One is the refineries, and then the petrochemical, and then specialty chemicals. Of course, the larger the scale of the plant in refinery or petrochemicals, the more the emission. And we don't see it as an emission problem, but we see it as an opportunity. Then there are more customers that you can tap on to test your technology. Another technology that's actually gone on over to in this test bedding scale is actually carbon dioxide to minerals. Minerals, in a sense, is like alternative sand materials. So where you can capture CO2 with waste material like incinerator ash, and this can be carbonated and made into alternative sand material that can be used for further reclamation. It can be used for building construction materials in the seaport, airport, and so on. This has also reached the test bedding scale. And There have also been an announcement on Jurong Island. One way to decarbonize is, of course, take the CO2, make it into something useful like SAF, sustainable aviation fuel, or sand. The other way is actually to avoid the emission by using other hydrogen or hydrogen and derivatives. There will be an announcement by government looking into ammonia as a potential source of fuel. And there have been also reports by government agencies that the possibility of using hydrogen as a huge chunk of energy rather than fossil fuel, using hydrogen as a clean fuel for power generation. And Jurong Island, there are many power generators. That obviously companies, power generators are also looking to mix fuel, whether they can mix natural gas and hydrogen and use higher hydrogen amount. All this work has already been progressing very, very well. And I think soon you'll hear more. We will be groundbreaking our low carbon test bed next year, and I hope to share more news on this development.
Thank you so much for that response. Okay, any other live questions? Okay, gentleman at the back, can you throw the cube to him? Thank you. Can you identify yourself? Thank you.
Is this a mic? I was just asking.
Can you identify yourself? Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I'm Lawrence Kwan from Climate Crafters. Just asking the panel. It's interesting that you talk about valley of death. It's actually kind word. I usually call it myself the bathtub of slow acid burn. For test bedders to commercialization is usually an arduous journey. Some has very good product, but unable to commercialize it. Some of the inventors doesn't have corporate experience to corporatize themselves. Just last week, I think Jane and I were in a panel to look at some of the inventors, and some of them, my heart breaks when they present. They just don't know what they are doing, right? So this is, I mean, the acid death will be more like it than the valley of death. Do we want to look into having a team of mentors for people like ourselves? When we started, there were nothing of such existed as a panel. We step on landmines so often that it becomes so numb that another landmine doesn't affect us anymore. I think something for us to consider to have this more success rate.
Thank you so much. Yes, mentorship is definitely a huge part of building an ecosystem, and I'll combine it with a question here about whether there is a need for programs to equip young people and entrepreneurs with sustainability and innovation skill sets. Anyone here wants to take a stab at it?
I was going to make a more general comment. As an investor that looks at innovation globally, and we invest in scientific breakthroughs, we definitely observe that some educational systems blend together better business astuteness with scientific skill set, and others don't. If it's a team of just scientists, you obviously need to pair with someone who, a team of scientists, they need to put together a team that has business acumen as well. And sometimes it doesn't come so naturally, but it's a must-have. Before I hand over to you about specific mentorship programs, one thing I was going to say is, as a suggestion, is every fund and every investor has a different strategy. But the strategy we have is we're looking for startups that are a good fit with the business network that we have. So even before we invest, we're thinking who are the potential relevant business partners. And if we don't see potential clients with our business network, it's probably not an investment for us. But once we do, then we can make those very important and catalytic connections so that a startup can grow faster and can develop faster. So when thinking about how you grow your business model, model and how it evolves, maybe always have on top of mind who are the potential business partners even before, while you're at the early stage, engage them, test, validate ideas with them so that you make sure you're building something that is really relevant to those business partners. You're not building in a vacuum. But of course, not every model is suitable for that, but that's how we operate, and that's how you can pass that one valley of death, which is before commercialization. And those business partners can be JV partners to fund your commercial project, so you can get capital from them, not just commercial validation. And they can also be your M&A buyers on the other end. So for an exit, which we venture funds, we're always talking about exits too.
Thank you.
Back to
Thank you. I fully agree that having been scientific work for most of my career, I think pure scientists may not be the best entrepreneur. I think you need a partnership. And of course, in A-Star, I'm also very happy that we have, I think, over 2,000 scientists. There's also a scheme for scientists to join a fellowship-like program to coach them, guide them before they could actually start up companies and be seconded to the startup companies for a period of time. Maybe for me, I'd just like to touch on the test bed, the scaling of technologies. And very often, I meet both scientists in A-Star and also external partners. They have very exciting ideas, breakthrough ideas, and they are very successful in a lab scale. But that's what they are best at doing. So when it comes to increasing your catalyst, let's say at a gram scale to a kilo of catalyst, then how do you make from 1 gram to 1 kilo? I think it requires a different discipline and different set of trained scientists or technical scientists to do that. And how do you judge the price of making 1 gram compared to 1 kilo or 10 kilo. So I think partnership is really needed. And that's also one feature of the low-carbon test bed we offer, because low-carbon test bed is not just infrastructure. When it comes to scaling up beyond the valley of death, there will be a group of experts who are experienced in doing that, who have built large chemical production units worldwide. And this group of experts will then complement the knowledge of the scientists in a way to mentor them and guide them through the valley of death, technically.
Thank you for that. I think we have time for maybe one more question from the audience, if there's one. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, hi, so Phil Jones from Fluvolt. One question more generally for the board. Climate investment is a lot focused on the CO2 reduction element of it. I just would interested in the views of where the critical mineral supply comes into the potential investment opportunities, scope, etc., of how you look at it, because that's, I mean, excuse the pun, that is critical for the climate change, the new tech that is being developed, and it's a dirty space, actually, in terms of the embedded emissions in that space. So general question, just to get your views, I'd be interested in it.
Very interesting question. The critical minerals supply chain is complex.
Phil, go and talk to Donna, who is on the other side of the room at the end of the meeting.
Spencer, perhaps, from the perspective of an off-taker of and a builder of data centers, I suppose, how do you think about that supply chain?
This is actually a critical question for us. Google has two intersections with that question. One is we have a consumer electronics business, and there will be critical minerals used there. But we also have a lot of data centers which have an end of life, and we have a zero waste to landfill policy, which we're very close to hitting. That's a pathway there. And so for us, to this point, it's been a lot of emphasis on recycling and making sure that there is, that the recyclers that we're working with are actually trying to maximize the value of what they're recycling. But we do find that if you look across the world, there is probably a lot of opportunity for disruption. There are very professional outfits that do that, but in some parts of the world, but not in others. And the ability to extract value from what they're recycling is mixed. And even upstream, could you actually use less of these materials and replace them with more common elements? These are all areas that we're looking at quite actively. So I think it is an interesting business opportunity.
And perhaps Jane, because you talked about investing.
I want to echo that. I think critical mineral, critical material is very, very important areas and in the whole climate and energy transition play in terms of startups. I think when there could be both opportunity and challenges in this space. Challenges is you're competing with the commodities, right? So, and that's very challenging. And for new technology, so what's your tech? What's uniqueness you have? What's the business model you have that really you can really stands out? And but the opportunity, I think, in today's environment, critical mineral actually is a domestic production refining of critical mineral can be a strategic importance for many countries. So that's an opportunity space. So yeah,
Yes, in fact.
bottom line, it's very important, very critical for the energy transition.
Yeah. And I think we've seen countries like France and Australia actually building up that capacity because it's dominated by China at the moment, right? But there's a lot of commercial opportunity for sure in this huge energy transition. I'm just mindful of time, so I'm just going to wrap up with one last question for the panel, and I'm going to combine it with a question that was here in the Slido about policy being mentioned a few times as a hurdle, right, and as an obstacle when it could potentially be an enabler. So my question for all of you is looking ahead. Yeah, it has been quite challenging for everyone, but what is the one policy or business decision that you hope to see that would really help to unlock catalytic capital for climate tech? Who wants to start first? Elena?
I gotta think about that.
Okay, Dr. I'll come to you for the policy guy.
So my background is more science, and I think policymakers are my colleagues in the statutory board. So probably not the best person to make comments on policy without consulting my colleagues for their clearance. But I do have thought very long and hard for climate tech research. This is a part that I think that requires the close attention to. And for entrepreneurs and scientists, I always tell my colleagues, okay, what is the government setting? For example, SAF, sustainable aviation fuel. So what is the mandate for your country? And then if you make sustainable aviation fuel here, then how does it apply to your country? And be watchful, because policies is not done by a single country. It's done by actually collective. So different countries have different policies, of course, but they are interrelated in being influenced. And my suggestion is pay attention to professional bodies to see where the potential direction is going. And policies do change from time to time. So what do you do if policies change? But so I would encourage to see in more long-term direction on, okay, reducing fossil fuel as a long-term policy. So how do you do that?
Right. So yeah,
Milena.
maybe I will also maybe add a point. I don't know which one is the right one, right? So if I already know, then I already recommended. But if I'm looking at what is a policy needs to be, totally agree, needs to be long-term, consistent, and transparent, and also hopefully consistent cross-region rather than just single country. That's the one. Another one is system. I think the policy needs to make impact, make influence at the system level. What I meant by that is thinking about the policy influence in funding, government funding. Thinking about the funding, we just talk about the gaps, the value of debts, multiple of them. The whole entire maturation pathway from the lab to commercial. How can policy look at the system level, can influence the funding? I would say this. You could say that either from a subsidized or government supported funding, such a way there's an optimized outcome. So in looking at instead of I want to put this much research funding. I want to put out this much for the scaling up. I want to put this much for deployment. Yes, those elements, but need to think about in the system way.
Thank you. Systemic thinking.
Jane said a lot about what I wanted to say about being consistent and bringing systemic change. But the other thing final thought I'd like to leave you with is climate tech has recently had a bit of a negative connotation. Of course, the US administration has a lot to do with that. But what we're looking at really is just building a better world with technologies that are incredible, and they're solving big structural problems, whether it's about the surplus energy we need to bring to this world, because this incremental energy cannot come just from fossil fuel, which is a finite resource, or whether it's the urbanization that Google mentioned, which is very rapidly happening here, and we're breathing air that is affecting our health as well. So all these things are structurally important. It's not just climate, but it's about our own well-being overall.
Well said. Spencer.
I'd like to take a slightly different angle, which is much more practical, which is the fact that the way things work or allowed to work that got us into this situation are not probably the ones that will get us out of it. And so from a policy perspective, it's really important to allow new solutions. And so test bedding, I think, is really important, so really commend the Singapore government for doing that. But we've seen many technologies which are novel, and as they try to scale, then there are policy levels around, is that safe? Can you move that material through the streets? What does that mean for the grid? There are a lot of what-ifs, and to the extent that some of these are too conservative, everything just dies. And I think that's why we really need innovators amongst many here who are willing to try new things with funding that's willing to put a bet that these things will work, but we need the policies that will allow these things to actually prove themselves. And I think that's a really critical aspect of the policy de-risking, but through testbed frameworks, etc.
Yeah, very well said, Spencer. I think I go back to what I mentioned in my opening remarks, which was the imagination and the creativity that we are capable of. And going back to the video about how humans are human ingenuity. I mean, we are the architects and the guardians of this world. So on that note, please join me to thank this amazing panel for a really, really good discussion. I know all of you are looking forward to networking drinks and food, so I'll hand back the time over to Shirin. Thank you.